Hare Krishna. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today, we will be covering two verses from Canto 1, Chapter 19, Text 11, and Text 12. So without further ado, I'm going to be starting here. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Devarshi Brahmarshivaya Rajarsivarya Arunadayascha Nanashreya Pravaran Sametan Abhyarcha Raja Shirasa Vande Anyevarshi Brahmarshivaya Rajarsivarya Arunadayascha Nanashreya Pravaran Sametan Abhyarcha Raja Shirasa Vande. That's text 11. I will do text 12 as well, and then we'll come back. My internet is not willing to cooperate.
Yeah, your voice was a little bit. We would not hear that so sweet sing, sweet recitation. So it was not. Internet was having some challenge, I guess.
Still having some challenge. Okay, let me do this. Let me get this out, and I will just do it from here. That's okay. I will have to log in. So just give me a second here so that I can log into my screen. Or still, can you share the screen, Prabhu, from your side so that we can move quickly?
I'll open it up.
Let me know if you can see me now. The video is clear enough?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can start, Prabhu. I will start the opening and.
Okay. Text 12. Sukopavashteshvatateshu bhuya krita pranama svachikirshitam yat Vignapaya virikta cheta upastito grebhi grihita pani. That's text 12. And going back to text 11, just to read the translations. After all the rishis and others had seated themselves comfortably, the king, humbly standing before them with folded hands, told them of his decision to fast unto death. Purport: although the king had already decided to fast until death on the bank of the Ganges, he humbly expressed his decision to elicit the opinions of the great authorities present there. Any important decision, however firmly fixed, should be confirmed by some authority. That makes the matter perfect. This means that the monarchs who ruled the earth in those days were not irresponsible dictators. They scrupulously followed the authoritative decisions of the saints and sages in terms of Vedic injunction. Maharaj, as a perfect king, followed the principles by consulting the authorities even up to the last days of his life. Reading the translation for text 12 as well. The fortunate king said, "Indeed, we are the most grateful of all the kings who are trained to get favors from the great souls. Generally, you, the sages, consider royalty as refuse to be rejected and left in a distant place. According to purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, according
Prabhu,
to religious principles too. Yes?
you are reading 13 now, or? Yeah, you
Thank
read
you.
12 earlier, I think, instead of 11, I guess. So.
I know, yeah, the internet, is misbehaving on my end. So my
Sorry.
apologies. I mean, I can cover 13 too, but no, today I'll stop at 12 so that I don't keep everybody on a weekend. So thank you. Translation for text 12 is after all the rishis. Okay, so maybe let me
You have to
start
read
over
11,
again.
Prabhu. Yeah, 11
Sorry,
you did not
I have to read 11 and then get back. Thank you for catching that. My apologies. There's a lag on my end from the internet perspective. I don't know why the network connectivity is not working right. All right, so translation for 11 is, there were also many other saintly demigods, kings, and special royal orders called Arunadayas, a special rank of Rajashis from different dynasties of sages. When they all assembled together to meet the emperor Parikshit, he received them properly and bowed his head to the ground. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The system of bowing the head to the ground to show respect to superiors is an excellent etiquette which obliges the honored guest deep into the heart. Even the first grade offender is excused simply by this process, and Maharaj Parikshit, although honored by all the rishis and kings, welcomed all the big men in that humble etiquette in order to be excused from any offenses. Generally, at the last stage of one's life, this humble method is adopted by every sensible man in order to be excused before departure. In this way, Maharaj Parikshit implored everyone's goodwill for going back home, back to Godhead. And just to make sure that we have some continuity here, text 12. Again. Under them. The purpose he expressed decision to elicit the opinions of the great authorities present there. Any important decision, however firmly fixed, should be confirmed by some authority. That makes the matter perfect. This means that the monarchs who ruled the earth in those days were not irresponsible dictators. They scrupulously followed the authoritative decisions of the saints and sages in terms of Vedic injunction. Maharaj Parikshit, as a perfect king, followed the principles by consulting the authorities even up to the last days of his life. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruvena Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhute Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dalati Swapadantikam Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyaiva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavibhyo namo namaha. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So like I said, we're reading from Canto 1, Chapter 19, and we're covering texts 11 and 12. So the scene is set with Maharaj Parikshit welcoming the sages and all the saintly persons of the highest caliber come from across the universe. And for what are they there? They're assembled there. It's not, just to, he's not invited these saintly persons to see himself, killed by a snake bird. The scene is unimaginable. I mean, if we were put in that situation, just what would we be doing? Would we be hiding? Would we be running away? Would we be seeking the shelter of our family members? Or would we be, being the emperor of the world, would we be executing Shringi for his reckless curse? Or would we be just wallowing in the self-pity and anxiety, unprepared and helpless? And here we're talking about no ordinary person. We're talking about Parikshit Maharaj, who is the emperor of the world. I mean, his record is unblemished. He is unchallenged virtually throughout his empire, which is the entire world, right? On any battlefield, he's been unchallenged. His name, his fame are unblemished, just like his lineage. I mean, he comes from a lineage that is so perfect. Great personalities like Bhishma Dev, like Arjuna, like Yudhishthira, like Bhima, and even Krishna himself. Maharaj Parikshit, just a little brief summary. I mean, he was a great personality. He was one of the grandsons of the Pandavas. And from his very, very early childhood, he was a great devotee of the Lord. So according to Jiva Goswami, he must have heard about the pastimes of Krishna even as he was growing up, because he would imitate these pastimes and play them out with his friends, with his playmates. And according to Sridhar Swami, he even, Parikshit Maharaj would even imitate the worship of the deities just like his elders. So even Vishwanath Chakravarti, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti also concurs with Jiva Goswami. So when you hear from all of these great authorities, we can clearly tell that Maharaj Parikshit was a great devotee of the Lord from a very, very young age, which means that he was a Mahabhagavata. This is a symptom of a Mahabhagavata or a Nitya Siddha, someone, a soul that is completely liberated from birth, right? We are all Nitya Baddhas, or, the majority of us are Nitya Baddhas. We have very few Nitya Siddhas. And Maharaj Parikshit exhibited all the symptoms of being a Nitya Siddha. Now, the irony is that someone of such unimaginable stature could commit, something, so silly as this in terms of, putting a snake on a person who's meditating, who's not even, being disrespectful intentionally or anything like that. But for someone like Maharaj Parikshit, who's coming from such a great lineage, for someone who's a Nitya Siddha, who's a Mahabhagavata, to commit something like this is unimaginable, right? And what's even more intriguing is that he could be cursed so hard that it was fatal, right? That he was actually going to be facing death. So this is really, really unimaginable. And when you look at that, more intriguing is that Maharaj Parikshit was such a powerful king, and he was a mystic. So he could have counteracted this curse. It's not that he couldn't have. He could have avoided the situation if he so wanted. But he did not want to do it for a couple of reasons. One was that he was compassionate. He was very, very compassionate, and he did not want to, take back that curse. And he also wanted to set an example for the world to follow. And if you think this is bad, even more ironical is the fact that as a child in his mother Uttara's womb, he was saved from death by Krishna. And here he is facing imminent death again. And you may ask, why is Krishna not here to save him? So even at the start of the previous chapter, in chapter 18, the very first verse talks about how Maharaj Parikshit was untouched by even the powerful Brahmastra that could potentially destroy this entire planet. So if we could just recap what led up to Parikshit Maharaj's earlier episode, was the fact that when Duryodhana was killed by Bhishma Dev, by Bhima, he was going through his last moments, and Ashwatthama and Kripa and Kritavarma were three warriors that were right there by Duryodhana, and they were seeing him die on the battlefield. And so Ashwatthama was so upset that he wanted to take revenge. He wanted to avenge both his father's death as well as what was happening. His very close the Ashwatthama actually going into the Pandava camp and then severing, or cutting off the heads of who he thought were, the Pandavas, the five Pandavas. And he was given by Lord Shiva himself as he had the sessions appearance, and Ashman gave him a shiny, sharp sword by which so then Ashwatthama actually he actually ruthlessly slaughtered, these sleeping youngsters who he thought were the Pandavas. And then he didn't even, in the darkness, he didn't even look to see, who he had killed. And he put all those heads that he had slaughtered of those youngsters that were the sons of the into a sack, and he brought them back to Duryodhana and very proudly announced, Duryodhana, here I am, I've avenged, your, what's happened to you and what's happened to us. Here we are, I've done something that others couldn't even achieve or accomplish. And when Duryodhana felt the heads with his big hands, strong hands, Kshatriya hands, he said that something was wrong here. And he admonished, he screamed out at Ashwatthama. And Ashwatthama is fully ashamed now. He's like, what have I done? And now he knows the wrath of the Pandavas were on him. And sure enough, Bhima was charging towards him. So was Arjuna with Krishna at the chariot. So it was like a very frightening scene at that point. And his powers so although Lord Shiva had given him the sword, he had lost his powers. So in a fit of anger and a fit of anxiety, he released the Brahmastra. And Krishna knew very well that Ashwatthama was not trained completely in terms of how to release the Brahmastra, how to use the Brahmastra in the for the right reasons. And if it came to that, how to retract the Brahmastra. So it was a very scary situation. So you're talking about having something so powerful that could completely destroy the entire planet, just like with a flash of light, practically. And in the hands of someone as immature and someone as untrained as Ashwatthama in terms of the Brahmastra. He was a great warrior. He was a great warrior. But when it came to actually, dealing with the Brahmastra and the use of the Brahmastra, and the Brahmastra is the king of all weapons, right? As we know it. So he releases the it's all going to be over. So Krishna quickly advises Arjuna and says, Arjuna, you release, the celestial weapons to counter the Brahmastra, which Arjuna faithfully follows. And he releases, he takes, a tuft of kusha grass from the ground, and he meditates, offers prayers, and releases his celestial weapons. Now, on the other side of the banks of the river, we have Vyasadeva who's meditating, and he's watching this. He's seeing these flares go up in the sky, and they're lighting up the entire sky. I mean, it's like a frightful scene out there, right? No one can miss that. So Vyasadeva realizes what is happening, and he quickly runs over to the battlefield and tells Ashwatthama, what the heck are you doing? What is this that you're doing? This is completely wrong. Please retract your weapon. And Ashwatthama is struggling now. He doesn't know how to retract his weapon, and he's struggling so hard. And then he realizes, maybe he should, he could redirect it somewhere else and, somehow reduce the effects of the Brahmastra. And that's when his crooked mind is thinking, oh, look at this. I've already taken care of the sons of the Pandavas. And so there's only one other that's left, which is who is Uttara and Abhimanyu's son in Uttara's womb, who's Parikshit Maharaj, still, a fetus that is in Uttara's womb. So he was like, I'm going to redirect the Brahmastra so that it goes directly at Parikshit Maharaj and completely stops that entire Kuru dynasty right there. See how his crooked thinking was even at that time, right? So he redirects the Brahmastra, and the Brahmastra is now heading towards Uttara and Draupadi, who Draupadi by then is already devastated, that the sons were slaughtered so badly, so ruthlessly, and so heartlessly that, so everybody's in a state of, total despair at that point in time. There's a lot of chaos happening on the one hand. There are, personalities who are, also grieving very much and so much more. There's grief that's being experienced by Draupadi, by Uttara, and by others. And then feels this heat coming towards her, her stomach. And then she realizes that something is definitely wrong. And that's when she, reaches out to Krishna and offers prayers and begs, to do something about it. Krishna using his internal energies, and he gets into the womb of Uttara and saves Parikshit Maharaj, right? So that is the situation where, Parikshit Maharaj is saved by Krishna, and that was then. And now we have Parikshit Maharaj who's facing imminent death in 7 days, and he's going through a very similar situation in terms of facing that eventuality. So dire are the circumstances, and so perplexing is this dilemma that if we were to analyze this with our mundane senses, this won't make sense at all. But as the devotee of the Lord, Parikshit Maharaj knew very well that even in this calamity, he had the protection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna. Dehinosmin yata dehe kaumaram jara, right? So in that verse, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that the Jivatma, or the spirit soul, does not die, but merely transmigrates from one body to another. So for the devotee, Krishna's protection is always there in life and in death. Take Gajendra's example, for instance. He was the king of elements, but somehow got into trouble and ended up fighting for his life from the jaws of a crocodile for
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Can others hear me or Prabhu?
We can't hear Prabhu. We can hear you, Prabhu.
Oh, okay. Having internet.
Yeah, we can hear you, Prabhuji. Looks like Prabhu is having internet issues.
We're continuing to speak.
His video seems to be coming through, Prabhu, but not his audio.
Yes, I'm calling him.
Can you hear me now? Is this better?
Yes, Prabhu, I think so. Yeah, we lost. So.
Okay, let me see if I can cut my. You're not hearing an echo.
You
right
can
now,
turn
right?
off your video, Prabhu, in case if that is the issue, right? Bandwidth issue. That's okay. Yeah, now
is
it's
this
better.
Okay? I mean, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So what I was saying was that Parikshit Maharaj as a devotee is, coming in with folded hands with all the humility, in the presence of these saintly personalities, and they consult with the authorities about his fast unto death. Okay, so this is, and how is he doing this? This is Vignapayam Asha. So Vignapayam Asha is what? Is being completely, fully surrendered, fully submitted, right? Not with the attitude that I, my word is the law. It's not that. So decisions should be taken like that. Decisions like that should be taken by consulting authorities. And take Arjuna in the case of Ashwatthama, right? Who had slaughtered Arjuna's children as we spoke. And this was very ruthless. So Arjuna was not sitting down quietly. The Kshatriya in him, obviously, first of all, this is his own kith and kin, his own, children. But on top of that, you're talking about a Kshatriya. So he vowed to bring Ashwatthama back to Draupadi. And he did that. What did he do? When Krishna saved Parikshit Maharaj, Arjuna was able to retract that Brahmastra that he released himself, and he was able to retract that. And instead, he was able to release another set of celestial weapons that actually bound Ashwatthama. So he practically captured him and dragged him like an animal, practically in front of and threw him at the feet of Draupadi, and said, "Here he is." And he took his sword out, and then he was about to lop his head off in front of, as a Kshatriya, he had given his word. He was going to kill Ashwatthama. What did Draupadi do? And in all the greatness that she showed, she said, "Spare him. I don't want, his wife and his children, his mother, to go through the same kind of grief that I am going through." So she said, "Spare him." And on the other hand, Bhima was like, "Kill him, kill him, kill him, kill him, kill him," right? Knowing Bhima. And Krishna was standing right there next to Bhima, and Krishna said, "Yes, I agree with Bhima." And then quoted from scriptures and said, if a Brahmana commits a sin, he is guilty, but and may not be killed. But if he's if he's done something so terrible as this, then he should be killed. There is no harm, there's no sin in killing a Brahmana who has committed such a crime, the crime that Ashwatthama has done. So he was getting conflicting, advice from both sides, but at the same time, Arjuna was still consulting with the authorities there, right? And what did Arjuna do? Arjuna, very intelligently took his sword and lopped off the tuft of hair that was, on the top of Ashwatthama's head, and that loft of hair, or that tuft of hair, was also, put together with this special jewel. That the jewel is empowered, and that was what gave Ashwatthama all the powers that he had. And also, while he did that, he also took away, part of his mustache. And being in a situation like that for a Kshatriya to be forced into a situation where his hair is cut off and his mustache is taken away, he's reduced to almost nothing. It's as good as killing him. And with the gem that was empowered gone, Ashwatthama was useless. So he was banished, and Krishna curses him and says, for the next 3,000 years, you will be suffering, you will be wandering from, place to place to place to place with disease and, all kinds of skin ailments for 3,000 years. So you will suffer the consequences of what you've done, right? So Arjuna kept his word, and Krishna was so pleased because he was actually testing to see, what would Arjuna do. On the one hand, his, wife Draupadi was telling him to, spare him, and on the other hand, Krishna and Bhima and the others were saying, "No, you must kill him." Yudhishthira Maharaj was also with Draupadi and saying, "No, it's the right thing. You should spare him." So he wanted to test. Krishna wanted to test Arjuna to see what he was doing, what he would do. And Arjuna, used his intelligence so well that he was able to satisfy both sides. On the one hand, he spared him, and on the other hand, he also killed Ashwatthama by, taking off his hair and humiliating him and then banishing him from the kingdom. So it was as good as dead. So we're all confronted with decisions. If you look at it, we're all confronted with decisions, right? Every day, every single day. Some are small, some are big. So we should ask ourselves, when we are faced with such situations, the best thing for us to do is to really ask ourselves, how is this affecting my relationship with Krishna? How is this affecting my Krishna consciousness? How is this affecting my service to Guru and Krishna? Want to do that because the reason being, we want to avoid bad consequences. We want to avoid risks, right? Actually, everything in this material world is a risk, right? Should we stay single or should we get married? So there are risks associated with being single. You could head down the wrong way, or you could maybe in your old age even not have anyone around you, right? On the other hand, should we get married? Oh, it all sounds good, but then there are risks associated with that as well. That proposal is also has risks associated with it, like is this marriage going to last? Am I going to have children? Are there going to be issues in terms of how I bring up my children, or how they respond, how they grow up? There are all kinds of so many things that can come into play. Similarly, there may be decisions like, should we live in an apartment or should we get a bigger place, right? Buy a house. And obviously there are risks associated with each. There's pros and cons. Take, for instance, even the decision, whether we wanted to stay with the church facility that we bought, back into 2010, or do we have a new temple facility to accommodate a lot more of our congregation and be able to perform our services really nicely? So that's also a decision. It's a very, very big decision, right? But at the same time, each option has its own set of pros and cons. It has its own risks, right, and benefits. So on the one hand, yes, we're getting a bigger facility, but that also means that we have to be able to come up with the financial strength to pay back the loans. And it's not just building the facility and forgetting about it, right? We need to run the facility. We need to sustain and maintain the facility and maintain the services and the quality of services for all of our congregation members, right? So that requires finances. It requires a lot of manpower. It requires a lot of strategic thinking, right? So there are risks involved with that too. Can we come up with all of that? And can we sustain this? So similarly, take today, for instance, and even otherwise, we are all here serving the temple, serving Guru and Krishna. We were so fortunate because we made the decision to stay in Krishna consciousness. We've come to Krishna consciousness, and we're seeing the benefits over the years. So we're seeing so much value, right, in terms of what we're trying to do. Now, there are risks associated with that as well, right? So one may say, okay, what if you fail in your efforts, in practicing Krishna consciousness? But in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that there is no diminution or any loss in terms of whatever services that you put in, in serving Krishna and serving, the Vaishnavas. That never goes to waste, right? That benefit always remains, whether we complete our perfection or even if we don't achieve perfection in this life, it goes on to our next life where we are given a better chance and we start from where we left off. So we should stay on the path of Krishna consciousness no matter what the struggles are. And there are times when we will have, severe reversals. Just because we've taken to Krishna consciousness doesn't mean that, we are completely free from any of the problems of this material world. We are in this material world, like it or not, right? We have to accept that. And when we say that we are in this material world, we have to experience, the good things that happen and also the reversals that happen. And those reversals sometimes are small, sometimes are big. And they can even drag us down to a point where we can start doubting, what we're doing. Is this really giving me benefit? Am I really spending my time in the right place? Am I really benefiting from, being in this absorption of, serving Guru and Krishna? But that doubt should never be entertained. Never be entertained. In fact, even Narada Muni tells Vyasadeva in the first canto that, no matter what the struggles are, what the challenges are, one should constantly hear and be absorbed in the pastimes of Krishna and in the service of Krishna. So what is the loss, even if one has given up all the material comforts to take to Krishna consciousness and not make it? Similarly, what is the gain if one does not take to Krishna consciousness and instead, takes to building, their bank balance until the day of death, right? We all know when it comes to that moment, when we have to leave these bodies, this body, everything is gone with that. It's not like we're taking any of the wealth, any of the education that we've taken. But on the other hand, like I said, spiritual services and anything that we put in terms of efforts in devotional service are always maintained, sustained, preserved, and taken into the next life. So in fact, one time a reporter asked Srila Prabhupada and said, what if you find out at the time of death that you took up all this austerity and there was no God? To which Srila Prabhupada, being Srila Prabhupada, the way he answered it was, okay, what if you found out at the time of death that you spent all your life pursuing the material pleasures and there was God? So Srila Prabhupada went on to say to this dumbfounded reporter, who was lost. He was like, oh my gosh, yeah, that could happen too, right? And then Srila Prabhupada went on to say, look, it's not like we don't have parties. It's not like we don't dance. It's not like we don't sing. It's not like we don't listen to music. It's not like we don't have good food to have. What he was referring to, obviously, what I'm getting at. And what Prabhupada was getting at was, we have kirtan, we have, association of devotees, we jump and dance, and we have fantastic prasadam, right? So we are partying. It's just the consciousness is very, very different. We are also partying. It's not like we're giving up anything. Even these austerity, so-called austerities that the materialists are thinking are actually a source of happiness for us and a source of relief from all the bondage, all the anxieties that we experience from day to day. So it's the other thing I wanted to bring up is that it's not only about me becoming a devotee, for instance, or us becoming devotees, but actually setting that example and sharing something that we're receiving, right? These are all gifts that we're receiving. So keeping it to ourselves and just thinking about ourselves is being very, very selfish in one sense. A true leader would like to distribute and take care of the others, right? Like Yudhishthira Maharaj, if you see, the examples that we hear in the Bhagavatam and the Mahabharata, all the things that Yudhishthira Maharaj, he was such a compassionate soul. And so was Parikshit Maharaj. And so were the Pandavas in many ways, right? So that's true leadership. True leadership is being compassionate and being able to serve others, being able to give others and making sure that they're comfortable, right? So when we say comfortable in this sense is, how do we relieve them from this bondage in material life by giving them spiritual knowledge, by sharing what we are experiencing, the joys that we experience in devotional service. And, the realization of serving Krishna is the ultimate perfection in life, right? So we have this opportunity in our own small way to be able to influence others in the service of Krishna. So here's a very unlikely example from the Ramayana. So we all know the story, the pastime about Ravana was a demon. There was no question about it, but he was also a great scholar. He was a great scholar. But being scholarly or scholarship does not stop someone from becoming a demon, right? Thinking like a demon, behaving like a demon. So when he was faced with this prospect of Lord Ram, coming with an army of monkeys and destroying his kingdom, he became nervous. Obviously, these bullies generally tend to be the most insecure people. And so he called on his ministers and his friends, and he quoted from the scripture and said, one must consult, make decisions. And asked them, what should we do? We all know what followed, and the consequences Ravana had to face. And not just Ravana, not only he lost his life, but his kingdom was completely destroyed, and a lot of people, his kith and kin, were also killed in the bargain. So there are three kinds of people Okay, so there's an Uttama, right, or a superior that takes advice with like-minded friends and takes a decision that is best for all. Okay, then you have the Madhyama who makes his own decisions, right? And he's only what's him. So his decisions for the benefit of everybody. Whereas a Madhyama is also consulting, but he's consulting himself. He's not consulting others. He's consulting himself and saying, I can do it. I'm intelligent enough. I can make the decisions. But he's only thinking about himself, right? So that's the background there, right? That's the context. Whereas a Kanishta, on the other hand, right, a beginner, a novice, is completely, he doesn't care. He's clueless. He cannot make the decisions himself, but, he's ignorant. And so he makes decisions whimsically, right? It's just from the seat of his pants. And then there are three kinds of advice. Okay, so there are, when people on the other flip side, people are giving advice, there are three kinds. Again, there is the Uttama who can give advice thinking about, what's the best benefit, how is it going to benefit everybody. Similarly, a Madhyama would give advice in a mode of passion, saying, you should be thinking about yourself. You should be thinking about how it's going to benefit you and, how you can save yourself. Whereas, for a Kanishta who's giving advice, God forbid that we are in a situation where we have to take advice from a Kanishta who is only, is completely ignorant, doesn't care about anybody else, doesn't care about you, right? But he's giving you or she's giving you advice that doesn't really benefit you or anybody, right? So that when you look at that, we see three modes of material nature here. We see the mode of goodness. We see that is based on careful consideration. Then you see the mode of passion that is given based. The mode of passion where it's centered on a single individual. And then you have the mode of ignorance where people are not even recognizing God, for instance. They're atheists in a sense, and they don't accept the supreme power, right? So, and they're doing things in a very whimsical, a very irresponsible, very reckless way. But beyond all of this, the highest is in the mode of transcendence. And an example of that is how the gopis, for them, whatever they did, whatever decisions they made, it was all with Krishna in the center. So Parikshit Maharaj, as a devotee, you see him, he's making the decisions, consulting these wonderful personalities, and he's detached himself completely from all material affairs, right? And the verse, it says, Vivikta Chetaha, and being completely detached from all material affairs. And instead, he just didn't detach himself. He also resorted to absorbing himself in hearing about the topics of Krishna at this stage. He wasted no time. So you can say, oh, but Krishna was not there this time, to save him this time. And that's wrong. Why? Because in the assembly of such devotees, the Vaishnavas that were assembled there, it's like a Punyatirtha. Punyatirtha Nishevanath, right? In the assembly of such exalted personalities like Brahma, like Narada, like Vyasadev, and several others, right? Vashishta, Parashuram, and others. This was not short of becoming a highly sanctified place of pilgrimage, and that is the power of association, right? That's sadhu sangha. So it is no wonder that even after 5,000 years, the Goswamis, like Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami, were able to enter into the mood of Sukadev Goswami to interpret the pastimes of Lord Krishna in such a way that, with such intricate and intimate detail. And how is that? And I was hearing Amarendra Prabhu's lecture the other day, and he brought up a very sweet, analogy. We all are familiar with the FM radio, right? Where, and of course, now radios are not so popular, but in your car, perhaps you still have your radio there, but otherwise we're constantly, listening to bhajans, kirtans, when, we're using other devices like our smartphones and so on. But just take the FM channel for now for this example. And what he was describing was, as long as we tune into that FM channel, we're listening to this song, right? No matter where we are, right? We could be in Schaumburg, we could be in Naperville, we could be in Plainfield, or any place within the Chicagoland area. There is an FM channel that we're tuning into. We at the same time we will hear the same song, right? That's the beauty, because we're tuning into that frequency. So similarly, these wonderful personalities are also tuning in frequency, right? Devotional FM, so to speak. And so they're able to, hear the same messages, and they're able to get into the same mood. 5,000 years apart. Okay, here we're talking about being able to tune into an FM channel, in real time here. But we're talking about, 5,000 years apart between the Goswamis and what, Sukadeva Goswami was sharing with Maharaj Parikshit in that beautiful assembly, the elite assembly of sages and saintly persons. So that continuously, need to hear continuously, so that what you right, that should be our goal, our objective, to be able to get into that kind of a mood. Because once we get into that mood, then obviously, things are very, very different. We're straight away transcending all of these, things that we see in the material world. So Maharaj Parikshit, back to Maharaj Parikshit, right? So Maharaj Parikshit wasn't anxiously calling from help from all of these sages to protect him, or even look to Krishna to save his life. Instead, he deeply resented what he did, and instead completely absorbed himself in remembering Krishna. So this was a notable feature, right? As a true leader, Maharaj Parikshit did not succumb to his folly, something silly that he had done, and die in self-pity. Instead, he set an example for all mankind by taking the shelter of the Supreme Lord, right? And that's what we should do always, right? Now Parikshit Maharaj, because of the way this pastime unfolded, he was given advance notice that he was going to die in 7 days. Not all of us will be given that kind of notice, right? So therefore, it is even more important that we take the opportunity whenever we can. We need a question about that, right? And life speaks, give all this technology. But if you stop to think, all of this technology is actually taking our mind share away in such a way that we don't have any time left at the end of the day. And we're so drained, right? So therefore, Prabhupada has also given us this wonderful, and I just admire everything that, we reflect on what Prabhupada said, did, or instructed, was so practical, so pragmatic, even for what we're seeing even today, right? He spoke about Krishna consciousness being, the practice being like a sandwich program. We start in the morning. We start early in the morning so that we can do our chanting in the morning. We do the arti. We perform some devotional service. We have some prasadam. We start our day, get into the activities. During the day, we try to find during lunch or otherwise try to find some time to, be able to chant or maybe even hear a little more. And then in the evening, after all the craziness of work, we're again, we're offering arti, we're, completing our rounds of chanting, we're listening to, we're reading from the Bhagavatam, we're associating with devotees, so it's a nice, beautiful sandwich program that, starts us off, gives us the energy, the spiritual energy to get through the rest of the day. And then as, the day progresses and the material energy is devouring us, we get to a point where we need, a recharge, and that recharge happens at the end of the day. So that's the sandwich program that Prabhupada also recommended, right? So by doing this regularly, right, and this is where regulative principles come into play. So that's another thing with which our acharyas and Srila Prabhupada have instituted, not randomly, not whimsically, but created these regulative principles because we need these regulative principles to be able to overcome the material energy and keep us on track. Our prayers should very sincerely be, Krishna, keep me on track. Don't let me deviate, because I know the mind is so strong and the modes of material nature are constantly acting on us. So with a dangerous combination of these two, it's very easy for us to deviate and get off track. Very easy. And having gotten off track, it's very difficult to come back again, right? It's easy to be derailed, and then it is so much more difficult to come back on track. And when you come back on track now, you have to start from scratch practically, because your mind is so agitated, it's in different places. So you're fighting the material energy, you're fighting yourself also, right? Your mind is telling you one thing and you should be doing something else. And that something else is being on track, keeping yourself on track. So therefore, we need to have these regulative principles to take care of our day-to-day activities. We need that. We are not Nitya Siddhas, right? Like Parikshit Maharaj or the others. So we are Nitya Baddhas, and therefore we have to constantly strive. And how do we constantly strive? Through prayers, through chanting, through association of devotees and Vaishnavas, and making sure that we are engaged in reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, even if it's a few lines, few texts, few minutes a day. It is very, very important. And this is, a lesson, an instruction that I'm also, trying to imbibe myself, because I do get caught up, just like many of you, in terms of all of the work and everything that happens during the day and getting drained out, by the end of the day. So trying to stay, even if it's a few rounds, even if you're not able to complete your 16 rounds, do even a few rounds. That will bring you back. That will give you the motivation. That will give you the energy. That will give you the peace of mind that will allow you to refocus and come back into chanting the way you need to, right? And completing your rounds. Many a time I've felt like I'm completely exhausted physically, emotionally, mentally. I'm so stressed out with everything that's happening at work, getting through all these back-to-back meetings that we have. And so at the end of the day, I'm like, I have a few more rounds to finish, but I'm not able to finish those. So what do I do? How can I complete them? Can I take a day off? But that's the time when you need to recharge, and you need to really be steadfast in terms of being able to push yourself, motivate yourself, right? By either listening to Prabhupada's lecture or, lectures from such wonderful, disciples of Srila Prabhupada, senior disciples, who give us so much by sacrificing so much, by going from place to place, regardless of COVID or, travel or time zones and things like that. So we have to think, what is it going to take for me to spend a few minutes, to give that time to hear from such wonderful persons, such wonderful, folks that are, who have completely dedicated their lives to giving to others and helping us all get over this, difficulty and challenges in terms of facing this material world, right? So what does it take? If they can give so much, can I not give a few minutes of mine to be able to hear and give them respect in return, but also think about it. You're also helping yourself in terms of bringing yourself back on track. And then by, that helps us motivate and say, okay, well, let's complete, maybe one or two more rounds. And that will lead to, hey, 2 rounds went by. Now let me do, a few more rounds and a few more rounds and a few more rounds. And before you know it, you've completed all of your rounds. Believe me, it's happened many a time. And when I've felt that I'm completely exhausted, I've hit the wall, I can't do anything anymore. And then, when I start to chant and I set some small baby goals, and, I get to a point, I'm recharged and I feel like, hey, that was a breeze. I should be able to do more. And then, you end up completing all of your rounds. So that is what we're taking away from this. Maharaj Parikshit was a true leader, right? So there are a few things that I'd like to capture. I know we're at time. So Maharaj Parikshit first of all, he resented his mistake. He repented for his mistake genuinely and completely. And Maharaj Parikshit accepted the curse of Shringi. That's the second one, right? He not only resented what he did, but he also accepted the curse of Shringi, even though Shringi was a young, immature Brahmana. He was not trained fully, right? And Maharaj Parikshit, thirdly, Maharaj Parikshit, he detached himself from worldly affairs with no delay, right? To get completely absorbed in remembering Krishna. And that's important. So he didn't sit there wallowing, saying, it's this is my mistake, and I'm going to beat myself up. I should have done this, blah blah blah. Now how am I going to save myself? And go into a mode of anxiety. But rather, he detached himself from worldly affairs with no delay. And then he didn't just detach himself, but he also absorbed himself in hearing the topics of Krishna, right? In remembering Krishna. So Maharaj Parikshit invited, and then the next one would be, Maharaj Parikshit invited the sages and welcomed them with respect and humility, right? It's very much in contrast to what he had done with Shamik Rishi, right? He ended up putting the snake, a dead snake, around Shamik Rishi's neck. That was definitely not respectful, right? It's not respectful. It's not respectable. It's not the right thing to do. But he resented for that. And in this case, he's correcting himself. He's atoning. And you see, he's bowing his head, Shirasha. He is bowing his head to the ground and welcoming these personalities, these Vaishnavas, and offering them all respect with true humility, right? Humility that he needs to move on. And true humility also means not just that I'm beating myself up, but I'm actually atoning by remembering Krishna and doing my course correction like I should, right? And then the other one was Maharaj Parikshit. Then he not just welcomed them, but he also consulted them. He didn't exert his power as the emperor of the world, but instead he consulted and said, hey, I'm planning to fast until please tell me if I'm doing the right thing. I'd like to be completely absorbed in Krishna. So he's consulted them, right? And he's doing that again in a mode of humility. And finally, Maharaj Parikshit was unwavering in his faith in Krishna, right? So he was fearless as death actually approached, right? He wasn't cowering away, he wasn't hiding away, he was not in anxiety, but instead he completely accepted it, and with knowing that he was still under the protection or in the protection of Krishna, right? So this is true leadership. And when you think about this, Maharaj Parikshit was exemplary in terms of demonstrating what true leaders' qualities are and how a true leader thinks, how a true leader behaves, and how a true leader is so compassionate in terms of setting the right example for everybody else. Okay, so let me stop here and see if there's any discussion. I know it was filled with a lot of technological challenges on my end. My apologies, but we have a minute or two for any questions. I'd be happy to try and answer and respond. Any questions, comments?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Guru Maharaj Srila Prabhupada. I joined, Hare Krishna, I joined only halfway through the class. I was attending Arati in the temple, and it was a little bit, but in the half an hour, I heard all that I wanted to hear. I mean, you really walk us through, what the mind does and how to recover from it. It's very great the way you share it, Prabhuji. And then also about this last class also you mentioned how much time we are capable of losing, beating our own, our own selves. Why I did this? Why I did this? And lamenting and never moving one step forward towards taking shelter of Krishna. I am one true example of that case, Prabhuji. So last class also you emphasized on that one. This class also, I am very grateful to all that you are talking about. Thank you so much. Very nice to hear you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you. This is for my purification as well. I mean, I have a long ways to go. So thank you. Thank you. Any questions? Okay.
Yes, Prabhu, but I just wanted
Raj,
to...
Prabhu.
Can you hear me, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah, no questions, Prabhu. I mean, I just wanted to iterate what you summarized at the end also again. I was keep thinking, I think in the beginning as well, you started with saying that Maharaj Parikshit did not exert his power, right? He could have done whatever he could have done, but he consulted all the great sages, though he himself was Mahabhagavat, right? To see what action he should take.
Yeah.
Was very touching, Prabhu. So thank you so much for reacting.
Thank you, Prabhu. Mohini Mataji, did you have any questions?
No, Prabhu, I don't have any questions, but just my contemplation have been this one point you brought about how Maharaj Parikshit was able to accept see Krishna's hand, because, he could have sought Krishna's protection. He had protected him, while he was in mother's womb. And, he could have, but, I just wonder what it takes for these devotees to have this fearlessness, because, we're just going through some deaths in the family, and I can really see, my attachments and fear of death. So that's just, been my contemplation that, what is this quality in these great devotees, and how to eventually get there. But yeah, it was really nice, Prabhu, just your whole class. I always find you very great storyteller. I don't know what other name to give you, but I feel like what Sandhya Mataji was saying, like you bring the whole picture together for us, not just the verse itself, but like the whole story behind it, which is really wonderful to hear always. Thank you.
Thank you, Mataji. You bring up a very good point. So Parikshit Maharaj, unlike the time when he was in the womb of Uttara, his mother, he actually saw Krishna, even though he was in a fetal, position. He was, still getting his life together. He saw Krishna actually appearing there and saving him. The form of Krishna was there. That's mentioned in the Bhagavatam. In this case, he's sitting there in the assembly of all of these wonderful personalities. It's not like Krishna is there and present in front of him, right? But the acharyas tell us that, a pure devotee sees Krishna not with his eyes, but with his heart, right? I'll give you some examples, right? Just a few minutes, Lingaraj Prabhu, with your permission. For instance, if you look at Putana, for instance, she literally had her life airs sucked out by Krishna. She could see Krishna physically, right? She could see Krishna. And she knew she was going to die, right? And she was dying, and finally she died. Hiranyaksha, he saw Krishna with his eyes. Hiranyakashipu saw Krishna in the form of Nrsimhadev with his eyes, right? Even Kamsa saw Krishna in his true form, right? So you would think, is it the same? They also saw, but they were inimical, right? So they were it was not the same as how a pure devotee sees. So the vision of Krishna comes from within the heart, more so of the surrendered soul. This comes with with complete surrender. That's why even in the verse where Brahma is reciting, where he says Premanjana Charita Bhakti Vilochana, right? He says, Santa Sadaiva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti. Santa being sages, right? Sadaiva, always. And from where? From the heart. Hridayeshu Vilokayanti. Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Gunaswarupam Govinda Mad Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Right? So he's saying that it's even though Krishna himself, is the primeval Lord, he has innumerable, inconceivable attributes, but the pure devotees are always seeing him in their heart of hearts. With the eye of devotion. Okay, it's not your physical eye, but you're talking about, Brahma talks about the eye of devotion that is tinged with love, right? Which is anointed with love. So that has to be, and Krishna is only so much more partial in a way. And again, I'm saying within quotes partial, because Krishna really enjoys that exchange when there is love involved and there is not so much awe and reverence, and least of all, being inimical, right? But here in this case, pure devotees having that loving exchange, and Krishna really enjoys that. And when that happens, Krishna is always there. He's always there in the heart, whether we can see him with our physical eyes or not, right? So thank you for bringing that up. But that's how Parikshit Maharaj also was perceiving the presence and protection of Krishna.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu. Yeah. Just makes me realize how far, I have to go. But yeah.
But you're on the journey. So
on the journey, yes.
Yeah. At once in a while, just look back and you see how far you've come.
Yeah.
and take those baby steps forward. Continue. Don't again, stop to look back and stay and stand right there, but instead quickly move your head and your vision back to the front, so that you can look in your rearview mirror, but not for too long. You should continue to move forward. Yeah, that's what we need to
Prabhu,
do.
thank you.
Thank you. So Lingaraj Prabhu, with that, we can close the call.
Sure, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. Hare Krishna, everyone.